Broadcasting live from the Subaru of Gwinnett studio inside the Sonesta Gwinnett Place Atlanta Hotel. It's time for Travel Safely with Brian Mulligan. Travel Safely is presented by Applied Information, creator of the Travel Safely smartphone app.
Welcome everyone to Travel Safely, the business talk show bringing you the latest in innovation from transportation, technology and entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Brian Mulligan, coming to you from the Subaru Business Radio X studio in Gwinnett, Georgia. This show is sponsored by Applied Information, a technology company here in Gwinnett, focused on using technology to save lives and to improve traffic. Our guest today is Eric Clarkson, the mayor of Chamblee, Georgia. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Our topic of the day is autonomous shuttles and urban mobility. The City of Chamblee, under the leadership of Mayor Clarkson, is undertaking a bold initiative to be one of the first municipalities to deploy a driverless shuttle to help solve the so-called last mile problem. That is, how to get riders from common bus stops and rail stations to this final destination. So, Mayor, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Again, thank you very much for having me here.
So, first of all, before we get into the detail of all of that, talk to me about the Eric Clarkson story. How did you become mayor and so heavily involved in the regional issues as well? What's the Eric Clarkson story?
I moved to Metro Atlanta in the mid-'90s, I think about 94, 95. I met my wife, and then we moved into Chamblee. Didn't realize we were living within a municipal area, really didn't know much about the area. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, not really knowing anybody, just kind of came because it seemed like a really neat place to be and a lot of activity going on leading up to the Olympics. Anyway, my wife and I landed in Chamblee, recognized that we had a small government in the city of Chamblee. I was somewhat underemployed at the time. I was trying to start a business that wasn't exactly getting off the ground, so I had some time. And my wife was great in supporting my efforts to run for office. So I got involved on one of our volunteer review boards. It was our architectural review board, looking at trying to implement some real dramatic changes in Chamblee in the way that our built environment looked. I enjoyed that. I ran for city council. After one term, I ran for mayor. And so it's been a lot of fun being part of a 20-year transformation in the land use patterns in the city of Chamblee.
So how long have you been mayor?
So this is my 13th or 14th year as mayor. I lose track. So I was on the city council for one term, 4 years before that, and then like I said, on a review board for 3. So about 20 years complete involved with the city.
Oh, fantastic! And again, you're a testament to one of the things that I say as this entrepreneur and entrepreneurship, is that the world is run by people who show up.
Right.
And so what you did is you're an entrepreneur, and then you showed up and
right.
got involved in. So congratulations and for your involvement in transforming Chamblee. So let's start off discussing the plan for the autonomous shuttle. How did that come about, and what are you hoping to see out of your autonomous shuttle?
So I've been fortunate for the last, I think, about 5 years now to serve on the Atlanta Regional Commission Board of Directors. And as you probably know, the ARC has a program called the Link Trips. They take a group of folks of maybe 110 or so individuals from a lot of different backgrounds. Leadership within the city and the metro area and take them to different cities. We were in Detroit and just looking at the automotive industry and the changes that were taking shape, and was there with Pat Corletto, who is a business development person with Stantec, and we were talking about this and said, hey, what could we do to further Chamblee's advancement in mobility options? So we got back from Detroit. Pat led me to talking to some of the folks within Stantec. They gave us a match grant to do a feasibility study. So we did a feasibility study, and from that, it showed that, as my term I use is Chamblee was kind of a target-rich environment. We had a MARTA station. We've got a large campus of the CDC with IRS, so federal employees. We've got the airport, DeKalb Peachtree Airport there. Lots of opportunities to connect that, as you mentioned earlier, that last mile connectivity from our MARTA station. So from that, we were fortunate, and our team went after a grant with Georgia Tech, sponsored by Georgia Power. It was the Georgia Smart Cities Challenge. We were one of the first cities, and jurisdictions in the state of Georgia to be awarded that grant. It was the first year they'd done that. They awarded it to 4 different jurisdictions. So we received a grant to take it to the next level to be able to look at what was the infrastructure needed, how would we actually go about running a vehicle like this.
So what is the route and what will the experience be for the public using the shuttle?
So initially, the route that was kind of the low-hanging fruit that made the most sense to really run a pilot program on was running north and south along Peachtree Road from our MARTA station. And so north up to the town center area that we're working through a plan right now to redevelop into more of a walkable town center, and then south down to the confluence of Peachtree Road and Peachtree Boulevard, which some folks know is where the Whole Foods development is. So that would be the initial route. We have looked at the feasibility study that Stantec worked on with our team, and looks at other options of being able to connect down Claremont Road and getting over to the airport, or connecting over to the CDC, IRS facilities, those types of routes that could come. Even looking at possibly running it adjacent to our Chamblee Rail Trail, which that concept came out of a plan. Chamblee was one of the first cities back in 2000 to receive a Livable Centers Initiative grant from the Atlanta Regional Commission. So as you can see, Chamblee has always been on the leading edge of trying to do some very forward-thinking planning on how to reinvent ourselves. And one of the thoughts that came out of this was possibly running in parallel to our rail trail and being able to connect to some of our older established single-family detached neighborhoods.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so for the public, are they going to have to pay a fee to use the shuttle, or is it initially going to be free, or how's it going to work?
It's my understanding that initially it will be free.
Okay.
It depends on, I guess, the financing, but I think the idea would be to put it out there in a pilot program and allow people to get used to riding it. It's going to be something very new for a lot of folks, not used to being able to get onto a vehicle that doesn't have somebody behind a steering wheel, if you will.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so I think, kind of getting folks used to driving it. A lot of it is just going to depend on the financing, the revenue, or the financing that we're able to find to fund this.
Okay, and when are you looking to proceed with all of this? Is
So
this in the short term or in longer term?
Our team has just applied for a $8 million federal grant that the federal government has put out some money out there, actually quite a bit of money, to look at different mobility options and as it relates to technology and bringing new technology into our mobility options. So we've gone after one of those grants. We should find out late spring if we receive that grant or not. It was $8 million over 3 years. That would go a long way towards getting this program kicked off and actually running it. If we're not successful in receiving that grant, there are other options that our team is pursuing to find ways to fund running this vehicle.
Yeah, in fact, this is just the way of the future. It's inevitable. So even if this door doesn't open, there's another door somewhere else that'll open. And you guys certainly are forward thinking and have chosen to show up in terms of pushing this technology forward. So I think it's great, and I'm sure you get a lot of questions about safety and, is this thing going to run into people? Have you guys seen this in action in other places and happy about the safety side of things?
So, yes, there are a lot of questions that I receive about safety on this particular vehicle. I think, technology is changing so rapidly, and it's sometimes hard for people to wrap their minds around what our mobility options will look like. And of course, I think there's a very natural reaction to be afraid of some of these things. One of our council members and myself took a trip up to the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area and actually rode on a vehicle manufactured by one of the companies that we're looking at potentially using to run this vehicle. And it was on a controlled test track environment. Right. However, they produce things like, as you drove around the road, somebody in bicycle come out in front of you, or somebody stop really fast in front of you. And both Brian Mock, our council member, and myself were very impressed with how the vehicle operated in those environments. So I feel very confident that we'll be able to put something on the road that's safe. But I do understand that people will have some apprehension about initially riding on something like this.
Well, that's what we also talk about socializing the technology. So you have to get it out there and let people experience it,
right,
because otherwise it just becomes terrifying. And the reality is, we know from the numbers, the most terrifying thing of all is to be on the road with a human-driven vehicle. I mean,
sure,
that's a really dangerous thing to do.
Sure.
And yet we're all used to it, so we do it every day.
Right, and it is. It can be very dangerous just to drive through your neighborhood, and we all know that. So yeah, I think that once people get used to the technology, I've heard transportation, other planners say that a child born today will never drive an automobile. I find that kind of sad. I've been blessed. I had an opportunity to drive a race car at one point. I had an opportunity to four-wheel drive off-road in my Jeep, and I like to drive. But I think it's very possible that the way technology is changing and rapidly as it is, that most vehicles on the road, or at least maybe in more urbanized and urban environments, will be operated autonomously. And what I hope is that Chamblee can be on the leading edge of helping people to embrace that technology.
Well, I think that's great. And one of the things that I also like, and as you know, that we are on the private sector side, on the entrepreneurial side, is that this whole business of everything connected to everything is potentially going to change everything. And my guest last time on this show was somebody from Lime Scooters, and the scooter guys are an example of 2 years ago nobody had heard such a thing. We were all talking about electric bikes and things like that, and suddenly this scooter revolution is upon us. I mean, surely that's giving you guys a bit of heartache in the city, or have you given some thought to scooters and that side of things?
Yeah, there's so many things to think about with scooters, and one of those first things come to mind is, I learned the term disruptive technology some time ago, and you try to explain that to folks that don't work in this kind of field every day, and they say, what's disruptive technology? And I said, look at the scooter.
Yeah.
It just appeared, right? And so we have not had scooters per se, just from what I understand in other jurisdictions, these companies will just kind of drop them off. I know we're looking at ordinances to make sure that they are, that they're if and when they do show up in our city, that they are that they're utilized in a safe manner. One of my biggest complaints about scooters, and I think others share this too, is they just seem to litter all over the place. There's no place that they're docked, from what I tell, and I think that can not only be a safety hazard, but also just some visual blight. But it is disruptive technology, and I think that's what we all need to wrap our minds around, is these technologies are changing so rapidly. Who knows what's going to appear on the horizon just next year? Yeah,
one of the things that we were talking about is that because they, a connected vehicle like your shuttle's going to be, and everybody knows where everything is now, is that they were saying something like 37% of their rides start and end at a transit stop.
Right.
So the potential is even, while Chamblee's trailblazing this new technology and socializing the technology, perhaps some of the things we could think about is yourselves and ourselves and the scooter guys and the shuttle guys getting together to figure out how together we actually solve some of these problems. I'm a big believer in putting minds together to figure out, can the private sector and the public sector actually play together as opposed to being at loggerheads?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of P3 or private-public partnerships. I think just in several different ways, but coming out of the Great Recession, looking at some folks that thought that maybe government was the answer to everything, or others that thought private sector was the answer to everything. And what I have witnessed both in my career as being the mayor and then also my private sector job is that private-public partnerships in so many different aspects of our built environment, how we work together in looking at mobility options is advancing things in a great way right now.
Does the shuttle have a name? Have you figured out the branding for it yet? Is it?
No, we don't have any branding for the shuttle just yet. We've talked with MARTA at some time. We've got great friends on the MARTA board and within the MARTA administration, and I think at some point, they're working very closely with us to how we interact with our MARTA station. We'll be looking to redesign parts of the MARTA station so that the shuttle has easy access to drop off and pick up in the area. Of course, we know we have the creation of the new ATL. And talk with folks at the ATL and figuring out how we might work within that umbrella organization. But right now, this has been something that I think because Chamblee is a smaller jurisdiction, I think it's given us the luxury of being more nimble and being able to really focus on this. We don't have another transit project of this type going on. We're not a large jurisdiction. But I think at the point that we really get it running and we talk to our other partners in the transit business, it will come up with some branding.
Oh, that's a great segue into the break. So after the break, we'll look at the bigger picture of mobility in the region. And so on that note, here's 30 Seconds with Sarah.
This is your 30 Seconds or Less with Sarah. After Lyft, the popular ride-sharing service, went public last week, they had a surprise announcement. A new program they're calling Lyft City Works, funded by Lyft itself, aims to provide free and cheap transportation to citizens. This transportation will be provided to the neediest of LA residents, working with Mayor Garcetti's A Bridge Home program. In addition, this funding source will be put towards developing transportation infrastructure and creating a clean energy future. Although currently focused on the LA area, Lyft is planning to expand their service to more cities soon. Back to you, Brian.
In case you're just joining us, this is Travel Safely with Brian Mulligan, how to save lives and improve traffic. Our guest today is Eric Clarkson, Mayor of Chamblee, Georgia. So, Mayor, let's talk about where Chamblee is located and how it fits into the metro area and part of the bigger picture of mobility.
Sure. I always preface this conversation by saying that I realize that I look at City of Chamblee through, rose-colored glasses. And I've said for a long time, Chamblee is the actual center of the universe. But I also say that if you live in a city and your mayor doesn't think that your city is the center of the universe, you need to find another mayor.
Yeah.
Now, having said all of that, looking at where Chamblee is located, I can't think of a better jurisdiction that has the types of mobility resources that we have. As we've talked about, we have a MARTA stop heavy rail station. We are the 7th busiest, or possibly even, I've heard, maybe the 5th busiest general aviation airport in the entire country, and the 2nd busiest airport in Georgia is PDK, and it's wholly located within the city. We are bounded by 2 interstate highways, 285 to the north and 85 to the south, and we've got 3 state highways crisscrossing through our city. So Chamblee really is positioned to be, the heart of a lot of connectivity in where we're located. And I think that having that type of infrastructure in place really puts us in a desirable location to be transit-oriented driven.
Yeah, we're hearing more and more, in Atlanta here about the ATL, and it's interesting. So we're on the transportation technology side, as you know, and so we're talking to the folks at the ATL about let's make the buses work better. Let's make transit work better, because if we get together by giving them green lights and other various forms of technology, if we make the buses work better, and we advertise that, and we drive more ridership to transit, we can get these single occupancy vehicles off the road in a way that traffic as a whole works better. So what's your sense about the ATL and transit and this drive towards transit? Is this something that Chamblee's behind or supports?
Oh, absolutely. And as you mentioned earlier, I've had the opportunity to work more regionally on some of these things. And as a mayor in the metro area, I'm a member of the Metro Atlanta Mayors Association, and I'm actually the most recent past chairman of the Metro Atlanta Mayors Association. And the organization pushed for a long time, along with many others. But I remember, maybe even as far back as 10 years ago, going down to the Capitol and lobbying for some form of regional transit governance, and was very pleased to see the state step up. Representative Tanner and Senator Beach step up and do a great job for us in bringing forward some regional transit governance. And I don't know that anybody thinks it's perfect at this point, but it's something that was very needed to be able to pull all these transit agencies together. So from my perspective of being a mayor working regionally, I think it's great to where we're headed with the ATL. And then, as we said, more specifically, my role as the mayor in the city of Chamblee, as I mentioned a minute ago, I think that we are just uniquely positioned to be in the heart of the mix of all the different transit options. We're working right now with a group. I helped found a group called the Peachtree Gateway Partnership, which is a 501c6 organization made up of the 4 cities of North DeKalb and some of our private stakeholders in the region. And from that group, we came out and looked at what we needed to do to add transit across the top end as part of the top end 285 managed lane program. And we're getting pretty far down the road and being able to connect from Smyrna over to Tucker, and all the mayors and cities of those jurisdictions, along with the CIDs, have ponied up some money to do some studies, and we're working to make sure that we get transit across the top end. So once again, I think between Chamblee, Dorville, Dunwoody, Brookhaven, we are very well positioned to be able to see a lot of different transit improvements come to our region.
And that's one of the things that we in the private sector are supporting. It's actually great to, you guys are the innovative and the thought leaders in this area. And what we're doing is we're bringing along these new technologies, which, cell phones, smartphones are only 11 years old.
Right.
And that technology has transformed our lives.
Right.
And so this is the disruptive technology that you referred to that's potentially going to change everything. And, we're at the forefront of doing some of those things. And we certainly look forward to collaborating with you on some of these initiatives in the future.
Good.
It's obvious that transportation mobility play a great role in our society, and so just put your future hat on a little bit. Where do you see us in 5 to 10 years' time?
You know, I've jokingly said recently, I don't know how you could be a transportation planner in today's world, because things are changing, as we've talked about here quite a bit now, changing so exponentially. And I think it's very challenging, although, you know, we have to do something in planning for that. You know, I played football in college. I'm a football guy, so I always like Vince Lombardi quotes. But I think the most relevant quote that I've had come to my mind in the last couple of years has been Wayne Gretzky, when they asked what makes a great hockey player. And he said, you skate to where the puck's going to be, not where it is. And I think that's what we all need to do when we look at mobility. We need to be looking at different options out there and really staying on top of technology and making sure that we're putting the infrastructure in place so that when the puck's there, we're there to grab the puck and score.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end it on, because, you know, us in the private sector and the innovation, the technology sector, you know, we think the same, that this is going to be the combination of the private sector and the public sector, not the private sector or the public
Absolutely.
sector. Nobody can do it on their own, and what we're going to do is transform transportation in the next 5 to 10 years, like cloud computing and smartphones and the internet have transformed our lives.
Absolutely.
Today we've been talking about autonomous shuttles and how they'll help the local community beat the last mile problem for transit users and helpful in the mosaic of mobility. Our guest has been Eric Clarkson, Mayor of Chamblee and Transportation Visionary. So, Mayor, thanks for all you do, and thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Yeah, thank you for help making Georgia and the world a better place. Until next time, this is Brian Mulligan signing off from Business Radio X, and travel safely.